Hi everyone. In today's lesson, we are talking about present perfect tense. We use present perfect to talk about recent past experiences, or gives news. Typically, we don't know when exactly the action happened. Example sentence: Peter has finished the project. A package has arrived for you. Lisa has had a baby. In all these sentences, we do not have the time phrase that indicates when exactly the action happened. We just know that this action happened sometime in the past and finished. Let's look at the affirmative sentence form. When we are talking present perfect, you have to remember that the sentence structure will differ whether you use regular verbs or irregular verbs. To make an affirmative sentence in present perfect using a regular verb, you need to use a subject, then you need to add an auxiliary verb have or has, plus base form of the verb plus ed. To make a sentence using a regular verb, you start with a subject, then you add the auxiliary have or has, and you add the past participle or the third column verb, the third form of the verb. Let's look at the example sentence. Peter has finished the project. Peter is he. He is a third person singular, so I have to use an auxiliary verb has, not have. The verb finish is a regular verb in English, so all I need to do is to add ed ending to make an affirmative sentence in present perfect. Peter has written a new book. You see that I'm still using has, the auxiliary verb, because my subject, Peter, is a third person singular, but the verb write is irregular. That's why I have to use a past participle form, which is written. Another sentence: we have already finished it. As you notice, I changed the verb. I added ed ending because finish is a regular verb. For the auxiliary verb, I need to use have because my subject is we, plural. Remember that you use has for third person singular subject, he, she, and it, and for all other persons, you are going to use have. Another example with an irregular verb: we have already read it. The verb read in English is irregular. While the spelling is the same, the pronunciation is different. So although it looks like the base form, the past participle form is pronounced as read. Let's look at the negative sentence. To make a negative sentence in present perfect with regular verb, you will use a subject, then you will use auxiliary haven't or hasn't, depending on whether your subject is plural or singular. You will use base form of the verb and end in ed. To make a negative sentence using a regular verb, you will start with a subject, add auxiliary plus not, haven't or hasn't, and past participle. Example sentence: Peter hasn't finished the project. You notice that I contracted form has and not to hasn't, and I'm using has because Peter is a third person singular subject. The verb finish is regular, so I added ending ed. Peter hasn't written a new book. Here I'm using the past participle form of the verb to write because it is irregular in English. We haven't finished it yet. My subject is we, so I need to use a different auxiliary than in the previous sentence. I need to use the auxiliary verb have. Since the verb is regular, I added ed ending. We haven't read it yet. The verb read is irregular. Although you spell it in the same way, you pronounce it differently. The past participle form is read. Let's look at the question form. To make a yes-no question in present perfect, you will start from auxiliary verb has or have, depending on your subject. Then you will use a subject. Then you will use base form of the verb plus ed if your verb is regular, or the past participle if your verb is irregular. For example, has Peter finished the book yet? Possible options of the answer here is yes, he has, or no, he hasn't. Remember that I'm using has here because Peter is he, the third person singular subject. Have you read it? Yes, I have. No, I haven't. Possible options. I have to use have here because my subject is you. Let's look at information question. To make an information question in present perfect, you will start from a question word, followed by have or has, depending on your subject. Then you will use a subject, followed by base form of the verb plus ed ending if your verb is regular, or past participle form of the verb if your verb is irregular. Why has Peter written this? You see here that I started with the question word why, followed by auxiliary has, because Peter is he. You remember for third person singular subjects, he, she, it, I have to use auxiliary has. Then I use the form written, which is a past participle of the verb to write. How much have you paid for the book? My subject is you, plural. My auxiliary verb is have for the subject. And the verb paid is the past participle of the base form to pay, because pay is a irregular verb in English. Let's discuss briefly the difference between yet and already in the present perfect. Although yet and already essentially mean the same thing, we use them differently. Remember to use already in affirmative sentence. For example, I have already seen this movie twice. By using already here, I'm highlighting that this action has been done. I have seen this movie. We have already finished our homework. Again, it's an affirmative sentence. By using already, I'm highlighting that the action is finished. To make a question, I need to say, have you finished the homework yet? I cannot use the word already in a question. You can treat yet as a twin brother or sister of the adverb already in negative sentence or question. Have you finished the homework yet? No, not yet. I haven't finished yet. I cannot use already in the negative sentence or the question. I have to use yet instead. All right, let's have some practice. Please complete the sentences using present perfect form of the verb. Depending on the sign that you see in parentheses, your sentence will be affirmative if it's a plus, negative if it's a minus, or a question if you see a question mark. Pause the video, spend 2 to 3 minutes to complete the task. You can go back and rewatch the video if you need to review which auxiliary verbs to use. All right, let's check. Sentence number 1, has bought. My subject is Dana, she, third person singular. The verb buy is irregular. I have to use past participle. Number 2, hasn't found. Has, because subject is she, found, past participle form of irregular verb to find. Have you spoken? I'm using have because my subject is you. I'm using the past participle because the verb speak is irregular. The form is spoken. Have you seen? Again, I'm using have because my subject is you, and I'm using seen, which is the past participle of an irregular verb to see. Last sentence, have finished. My subject is plural, so I have to use auxiliary verb have, and the verb finish is regular. I need to add ed ending in an affirmative sentence in present perfect. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe not to miss my next lesson, and I'll see you in my next class.